You are listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast with Buck Joffrey. Get ready to change your life.
Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Wealth Formula Podcast, coming to you from Montecito, California. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're wondering why I'm staring down, I'm still recovering from a little emergency eye surgery that I had. And if you are not watching this and you're just listening, it shouldn't be any different. I don't know. But let's move on to the usual shtick here. Before I get started, if you are interested, there is a website associated with this podcast called wealthformula.com. Lots of different resources there to check out, including our investor club. And if you're interested in taking advantage of the current distressed assets in the real estate market, for example, that is a place that you may wish to join because we are still on a roll there with some good opportunities. Of course, you need to be accredited, and that means you make $300,000 per year if you're filing jointly, $200,000 per year if you're single, or you have a net worth of $1 million outside of your personal resident. So that means that you're an accredited investor, and you can sign up for the club, because who doesn't want to be part of the club, right? Who doesn't want to be part of a club? Anyway, let's talk about today's show, and we're going to talk again about artificial intelligence. And why is this important? We talk about it a lot because in this fast-paced world, missing out on technologies like this can be costly. If you look at history, those who fail to adapt face devastating consequences, or at least huge game-changing opportunities. And this is a lesson really every investor should be, paying attention to. I've seen so many even in my lifetime. It's kind of crazy. As I was a kid, there was these companies called Kodak and Blockbuster, for example, both giants in their industries, but both brought down by their reluctance to embrace technological change. So if you are, if you're my age, Kodak, despite pioneering digital camera technology, in the 70s, clung to its profitable film business, and by the time the company acknowledged the digital shift, it was too late. Kodak declared bankruptcy in 2012. Blockbuster, right? Remember going to the Blockbuster to go get movies? Kind of cozy thing to do, right? I mean, I kind of missed that, frankly, but what happened was, Blockbuster first was that they dominated video rentals in the early 2000s, but failed to really foresee that rise of digital streaming, which of course Netflix did. And Netflix actually offered to partner with Blockbuster, but the offer was declined. And as streaming gained momentum, Blockbuster's physical stores became irrelevant, and they declared bankruptcy in 2010. So these stories offer a clear lesson. If you haven't figured it out, technology waits for no one. Investors who cling to the past will be left behind, just like the companies. Another missed opportunity, in my opinion, of course, this is becoming a less and less controversial statement. I've been talking about Bitcoin since 2017. When Bitcoin emerged in 2009, many, including myself, dismissed it as a fad or a speculative bubble. I didn't look at it that closely, and honestly, I blame Peter Schiff for that, because I remember back early on, maybe around 2011, 2012, I used to listen to Peter Schiff, and I remember him making fun of it constantly. And goes to show you should be wary of getting your news from one source all the time. It wasn't until like 2016, late 2016, early 2017, when I was at a mastermind group where I was convinced by some of the other smart folks in the room that this was something that I should be invested in, and that's when I started bringing it to the podcast. But obviously, failing to grasp this potential of decentralized currency and store of value, a lot of people missed out on some pretty darn big returns, and I certainly could have hit that even harder. I mean, after a huge meltdown in 2017, I sold a lot of Bitcoin. I sold, what would have been worth, several $1 million worth of Bitcoin, because I was capitulating as well. Luckily, I got back in the market, but not nearly as heavily as I was initially to benefit from the current market. Now, today, we've got artificial intelligence, and that obviously is sort of the next frontier of innovation. And like digital film, blockchain, and personal computing before it, AI is posed to reshape industries and create new markets and ultimately redefine how we live and work. And there's companies that have benefited greatly from that. I mean, not necessarily directly from being the provider of artificial intelligence, but the hardware, like NVIDIA, which has positioned itself as a leader through its advancements in GPUs and AI-driven software. That basically shows against the potential rewards of early investment in this space. And so NVIDIA really underscores this idea of recognizing and investing in emerging technologies before they go mainstream. Investors who saw the potential in NVIDIA's AI capabilities years ago have enjoyed extraordinary returns. But again, the AI space is still in early stages, and there's still opportunities out there. Another anecdote I have for you, another sad miss for me, was that, I actually invested in NVIDIA back in 2019 when it was very early on. And it was because I had read a newsletter about technology and the importance of NVIDIA, and I was convinced for the moment. But, it's like one of those things where you put some money in there and then you wait a year and it seems like, there's nothing really going on. So I ended up moving my money out. Bad idea, because that would have been worth huge fortune because of the explosion in NVIDIA as well. So I've learned a lot of lessons here too. Some of it's not to have such a twitchy finger, like with NVIDIA stock and with Bitcoin and all that stuff. Sometimes if you believe in something, you've just got to give it some time. I have the same situation right now where for years and years I have been talking about what a great decentralized type cryptocurrency is represented by HBAR, Hedera Hashgraph, and I've been, I haven't really gotten my return yet. And man, every time I look at it, I'm like, wow, how long am I going to wait on this? But I just know that as soon as I get out, that thing's going to skyrocket. So I don't know that for sure, but that's what I'm afraid of, and that's what keeps me from moving out of it. It is a great project, and I'm still wondering why it has not seemed to necessarily grab the attention of many people, but it is what it is. We'll just wait and see. But the message is clear. The message is clear, right? Staying informed and adapting to technological advancements. It's crucial. It's crucial for investors in a world where innovation really drives market growth. Keeping up with technology isn't just smart. It's really essential these days. So those who fail to recognize that are going to be left behind, and those who embrace change will have a chance to ultimately shape the future and, benefit from the future as well. So as AI continues to evolve, it is, again, vital for investors to stay vigilant and ready to act. And this week's episode of Wealth Formula Podcast will help you understand kind of what the role of this artificial intelligence is going to be. You've probably heard many perspectives on this over time. And here's just another one, is to accumulate information and try to think about how you're going to play this out. And we will have that interview with this expert right after these messages. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, my guest on Wealth Formula Podcast is David Moschella. He's a non-resident senior fellow, Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. Also, previously was a research fellow at Leading Edge Forum, where he explored the global business impact of digital technologies with a particular focus on disruptive business models, industry restructuring, and machine intelligence. He's the author of Technology Fears and Scapegoats, 40 Myths About Privacy, Jobs, AI in Today's Innovation Economy, and Seeing Digital, a Visual Guide to the Industries, Organizations, and Careers of the 2020s. David, welcome.
Thanks, Buck.
Well, with all this AI buzz here, maybe we ought to just start with this. Do you think it's it seems like you hear people talk about AI and it's fundamentally going to change everything. Obviously, we're in the world here, at least on this show, about investing in real estate, investing in assets, things like that. How much do you think this is is real, and if it is, how long before we see this new promised land, or maybe not promised land, maybe this terrible place?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. And to me, it's just really useful to look at AI in the context of the computer industry's history and growth and change. That the industry itself is now a bit, 60 some odd years old, and we went through a mainframe era and a mini computer era and a personal computer era and a mobile phone era and an internet era, and now we're in the AI era. So it's sort of the next great phase of the industry. And all five of those phases created tremendous changes and opportunities and wealth. And I think it's fair to say that those cycles of opportunity have gotten bigger with each phase. So you can make a good case that there are tremendous opportunities in AI. But I think from a more sort of cautionary point of view, it's like, okay, all those eras were great, but they didn't, radically change the world or lead to all of these, cataclysmic changes. So it gives you sort of a positive sense that the changes have overwhelmingly been good over time, and that's sort of our take that they'll continue to be.
I think the difference is that when people talk about AI, they don't, you talked about all the different innovations, and whether you're going to smartphones or whatever, but those are all tools. And I guess the question is, with AI, is this not just a tool? Is this something more than a tool? Is this a fundamental, recalibration of our interface with technology?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it is still primarily a tool, but it's a software and data tool. And you're correct, the other ones were more hardware and physical device oriented. But I'm not sure that's a huge difference. It's basically the center of gravity of the industry today. It's where the innovation goes. It's where the capital goes. It's where people are trying to move ahead. And yeah, in a sense, it's different in that it's expanding the human mind and taking on that. But the analogy we often use is machines amplify human strength and speed tremendously, but never diminish the value of human strength and speed, as you see in the Olympics and many other things. So the fact that we have very smart machines isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I would also just point out that in every field today, in healthcare or finance or whatever, it's the combination of machine and human intelligence and capability that still is the most potent way of dealing with whatever situations come up. So the idea that sort of human worth and role and value is going to fundamentally go away, maybe sometime in the very distant future, but if you're in investing today, that's just not a scenario we're really looking at in any serious way.
How do you see it changing the face of investing, whether that be in real estate or stocks or whatever you invest in the short term? Because this technology is moving very quickly, right? So what are some of the things that you do look at and say, yeah, that thing that we're doing right now could change very quickly in the next few years?
Yeah, and the quickly you can look at a number of ways. Computer science has been working on the notions of artificial intelligence since the beginnings of the industry, so 50, 60 years. And the great sort of innovations in machine learning and so-called deep learning were in the 2012 to 2016 period. And it really wasn't, of course, now with the Chat GPT and all of those sort of products, it's exploded. But I think if you look at it from a time point of view, it isn't necessarily as fast as it sometimes seems. The proliferation has been fast, but the underlying thinking and technologies have been really building for some time. From an investment point of view, as I said earlier, every era of tech has created tremendous opportunities.
Sure.
All you have to do is look at NVIDIA today, and that is in many ways the fastest, biggest of all of the great fortunes that have been made. Less than 10 years to get what it's done, which is more than Apple or Google or any of the others. And so that gives you a sense of the scale and potential of this. But I think the other thing, though, from an investment point of view, is sort of interesting, or at least my take, I always like to look at its impact on competition in the business. And from a tech point of view, the key issue is always, well, are new companies going to win this space in the way that Facebook and Meta and Google and all did, or is the existing guard going to hold on? And when you look at AI, on the hardware side, you see obviously NVIDIA or TSMC making the stuff, but on the services and data and software side, the old guard, the Googles and Metas and Amazons, they're all still in many ways and Microsoft, of course, sort of the leaders in this space. And that says to me that unlike some of the other tech waves, I don't know if you're familiar with the sort of language that Clayton Christensen's like to use about disruptive versus sustaining technologies. And the disruptive one is where the technology comes in and basically replaces the existing order in the way that the personal computers replaced mini computers, or smartphones replacing landlines. And that's sort of a disruptive scenario, whereas a sustaining technology is one that the existing companies actually benefit from and run with and continue to lead.
Right.
And when you look at AI today, with some exceptions, OpenAI and all, it's the existing companies that primarily are in the lead. And that, at least so far, suggests that it'll be more of a sustaining technology. And you see that in the valuations of those companies as the AI boom has come on. You mentioned real estate. I know that's an interest of you and your audience. Not necessarily the core of this topic, I suppose, unless you're making giant server farms and need some real estate and power to do that, which is a huge issue.
Well, I think what we're trying to understand is, I think what you're referencing is like, the changes in strength and valuation of these companies. Whereas I think the approach that I'm talking about, or the things that, some of our listeners are interested in, is, okay, so is there any changes that I should think that are coming up because of this AI revolution in what I do, which is, investing in brick and mortar real estate and, through private equity and those kinds of things? Or is this really just sort of isolated into the world of technology and going to make, tech investors more wealthy and make it so I have cool gadgets?
Well, there'll certainly be a lot of the latter, the cool gadgets and wealthy. But, in terms of industries, finance or healthcare or, entertainment or any other sector, they're going to use, of course, AI in many interesting ways, as they always have. In many ways, look at how the internet changed all of those industries without necessarily changing, the hospitals are still there, the doctors are still there, but they have this entirely different toolkit to use. And to me, it's a very important one because, and I think this is sort of the key point that we stress, is just looking ahead, the need for expertise, the need for labor-saving devices, the need for more efficiencies in automation is sort of a constant theme across really every sector of both the public and private parts of the economy. And in that sense, AI is one of the few tools and few paths to really address a lot of the needs that everybody's facing in this era of aging populations and shrinking workforces and labor shortages and all of those things. And so I see it as sort of an automation play in many, many sectors.
So if you see it as an automation play and a real tech play, obviously, so there's this sort of idea out there, I think, which is probably counter to yours. When you take the Sam Altmans and Elon Musk, I mean, these are smart guys that say that, that AI is an existential threat and it's going to replace us and all that. And you look at those arguments and you say, well, if you imagine for a moment what effect that would have on, the economy, is that good for productivity or is that bad for productivity? I guess I'm asking you a couple questions there. One is that do you buy their stance and why? Why not? And then the second question is, how does that affect the global production, global economy?
Yeah, it's a funny thing what those strong statements they made about a year or so ago. And in the book, we have a whole chapter sort of addressing our sort of counter arguments. But I'd say a couple of things. First, I think even they I've backed off on those claims. That there was a whole batch of them 6, 8, 12 months ago, but you don't hear those anymore. And second, when you look at their own organizations, their own companies, they're absolutely full speed ahead in those areas. And so they're not pulling the reins. And third, and I spent some time on this, when you actually look at their arguments as to why this is going to be such a problem, they're not very compelling. That they tend to cite some of the very same things that you see in the press. They talk about, the rise of deep fakes or the rise of plagiarism. And these are, in many ways, particularly plagiarism, very manageable task, but certainly not existential in any way. And so when I look at those quotes, I think in many ways I think they might wish they could take them back. But I also think that if whatever dark sides they're talking about must be in the very, very long term, because none of those things are happening today. And if you look at Musk and he wants his mission to Mars and all the things that he's committed and I think sincerely going to try to do, well, he can't do those things without his robots and without his AI and all the things that, his core mission in life is dependent on this. And he's personally, investing tremendously in AI for X, for Tesla, for Neuralink, and all the things that he is doing. And so I have to say, in many ways, I'm mystified by why they said those things, because it's just not what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, are we seeing any impact on the economy yet? I mean, yeah, we're seeing huge, huge bumps in the S&P 500 from
Valuations,
the
yeah.
valuation of the companies. But is AI doing anything for global production, or do you anticipate it will be in the next few years?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think in many ways the actual impact so far has been quite modest. I mean, the products are amazing. You use them, you can't even imagine how they can give such incredibly sophisticated and good, in most cases, accurate responses so quickly and cheaply. So they're incredible. But when you ask that, well, what is the impact? I would say this. I like to compare it to search. Forget about the early search with Yahoo's, but look at Google. A tremendous search engine, tremendous value, tremendous wealth creation, an indispensable tool. But has it really changed the economy in any, what was Google's impact on healthcare or finance or
Yeah.
retail? You'd have a hard case making this dramatic at all. And yet, even, today, for most people, and I would include myself, I would much rather have Google's current search engine than ChatGPT for my own personal use. So
Right.
I think it's very easy to exaggerate the impact in the short term, and in the long term, we'll see. But as I say, tremendous innovations can happen, smartphones, the internet, without necessarily changing the way the economy works. And I would take that one step farther, is that if you look at the challenges that the economy is facing right now, transitioning to renewable energies or more sustainable food or more resilient supply chains from around the world, or food shortages because of wars or strife, almost none of those are really things that lend themselves to easy answers from AI. Those are challenges in the physical world. And the physical world has tremendous impact, plus potentially from robots, and AI comes into play there. But AI itself is not going to solve an energy problem or really any of those things. So I think as great as the technologies are, and in no way knocking, they're incredible. You
Yeah.
use that stuff, you're blown away by it. But does that lead to the way a hospital works changing radically? I see very little evidence of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Your book is called, there's 40 myths about privacy, jobs, AI, and today's innovation economy. What, we've talked about AI for a bit here, but
Yeah.
if there was a few others that you
Sure.
think would be useful to highlight, what would be the ones, the
That's
biggest
right. I mean,
myths?
the book itself basically started with our view that technology these days is seemingly blamed for everything. It's
Mm-hmm.
destroying privacy, it's spreading disinformation, it's undermining trust, it's undermining democracy, it's diminishing human worth, it's biased, it's discriminating against by race and gender. It's get this endless series of accusations. And the book is basically a rebuttal of that. And each of the 40 chapters is a rebuttal of one of those: privacy, misinformation, bias, whichever one you want to do. And AI is several of those within the book. And so it's basically trying to defend the digital world against its many critics, as we've gone from a world where technology was once seen as the savior to the American economy to today it being essentially a scapegoat
Right.
for all of societal ills. And that's why we use the scapegoat in the title of the book. But you asked for examples. So you look at something like misinformation, and people can point to internet misinformation of Sandy Hill shootings and QAnon, this and that. But the biggest sources of misinformation in the last bunch of years have been our own media and our own government telling us things about weapons of mass destruction, or whether certain laptops are real, or where the Wuhan lab thing was just a racist theory. A lot of the misinformation has not come from the tech sector, and the ones that have, I think, are actually a lesser thing. So I think tech is used as a scapegoat to blaming the ever-rising societal distrust, which has come from our own institutional failures in most cases, and not from tech itself. And that sort of is the core theme of the book, that the technology industry used to be really viewed quite positively up until about 2016 and 17. But for the last 5 or 6 years, it's been blamed for everything. And that's not only unfair, we think it's very dangerous, because if America turns against the tech industry, you can likely be less competitive in that sector at a time when China and India and others are certainly not pulling back on moving forward with tech. So that's the broader picture of the book.
If there's, other than AI, what are like three other things that you think? You got 40 myths here. What are three other
Yeah,
top myths of yours?
well, classic one, they always blame AI for being biased. And yeah, you can have biased AI systems, but the core message is that machines are fundamentally less biased than people.
Right.
And this is just an obviously true thing that has been proven really since the very beginnings of analytics and,
Sure.
and those sort of things. So that's another, people blame it for destroying privacy. And you can look at surveillance and some of these things, and they can be very scary. But if you look at the way technology's enhanced our privacy and the ability to look up things that are sensitive and you want to keep confidential without talking to anybody, and so you use Google to look up whatever your health or sexuality or personal situations or other things you might look up and so it increases privacy for tremendous numbers of people. And another one is, frankly, that, and this is probably a big one, that you hear all the time that technology is changing the world as never before. And this is just fundamentally not true. That the changes in the first half of the 20th century, electricity, cars, planes, clean water, appliances, sewage, lighting, all of these things, far more impact on people's lives than anything that come out of the technology industry. So, there's three. We get in other things about the way people view the role of government, and the sort of myth that the tech industry has sort of just grown up on its own without any help from the public sector, which again is clearly not true. So there's a lot of things in there, and what we tend to say readers is, of the 40 topics, there's probably 5 or 10 or 15 you might personally read about and just focus on those.
Yeah. Again, the book is called Technology Fears and Scapegoats. That's 40 myths about privacy, jobs, AI, and today's innovation economy. David Moschella, thank you so much for being on Wealth Formula Podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Be right back. Welcome back to the show. Hope you enjoyed it. And just a reminder, if you have not done so and you are interested in potentially getting involved with some distressed real estate assets, we continue to have some opportunities flowing in. We'll have another one in a couple weeks. I've just been made aware of a really nice one that I'm looking forward to. So if you have not done so, make sure you join the Accredited Investor Club ASAP, get onboarded. And that's it for me this week on Wealth Formula Podcast. This is Buck Joffrey signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast. Visit us on the web at wealthformula.com. The information contained in this podcast are opinions, not fact. As always, consult your own financial team before making any investment. See you next time.